Well, good morning, everybody. We are going to go ahead and get started here. We got a pretty good crew. Looks like 18 of us in attendance today. So thank you all for being here. Obviously, we try to curate this content to help you. And so I appreciate your willingness to engage and just kind of, dive into things with us. We are in the fourth module of a 12-part series that we're working our way through. And I did share the previous two modules with you folks last week, I think. I had also forwarded out our summer speaker series from last year, which is, I think, worth taking some time to review and go through. I think there's some great content in there from top agents. Those are really just interviews that I conducted last summer with a number of our top agents, and not just top agents, but agents who are having success but may not be completely at the top of the food chain when it comes to production. So I just encourage you to take some time with those. Re-listen to them. I give them to you in that format so that you can listen to them multiple times while you're driving, or at some point here, maybe mowing the lawn, doing things like that, working out. I think they're great content for that. So if you guys would have the ability to turn on your cameras, we would love to see you. A couple of quick things I just wanted to go over before we turn things over to Steve. First of all, if you're a new agent and you're in Michigan, Tyler Decker has agreed to start running a new agent roundtable discussion on Thursday mornings. And so we had sent out an invitation on that. We had asked for an RSVP on that. We have been doing this in Indiana. Sandra's been running this with, I think, a lot of success. And it's really these new agent roundtable discussions, we're not bringing any content to the table. We're really just opening it up for new agents to have a conversation about whatever's on your mind, whatever questions you have, case studies. It goes down all sorts of different rabbit holes. So Sandra's done a great job with it. Tyler is going to start running that for our Michigan agents. So I would ask you guys, please engage there. I have specifically asked both Sandra and Tyler that if somebody is on those calls without their camera on, these are participation required and requested. So we aren't going to, we're not going to allow anybody to be on without their cameras on. We want you to be engaged in those. So I would encourage you, carve that time out of your schedule and make sure that you're jumping on those calls, because I think there's a lot of value there. Number two, I wanted to remind you guys that on the main page of the Resource Center, there's a new training calendar, and it's being updated weekly. This is an awesome thing that I've been asking for a long time. Dan Garrison really has an idea here of building out training content that is best in class and to have very, very regular trainings that are available. So unfortunately, Cliff Karthauser is talking right now to the country. Now, you guys have had more of Cliff than anybody else in the nation because we've been working with Cliff for a year and a half, 2 years now. So it's okay that we're missing today, I think. But there are a lot of additional trainings that are going on by different subject matter experts. And I would just encourage you guys, get those on your schedule. Look at them, make sure you're tuning in, especially as a new agent. You can't get enough of immersing yourself in the business. And so those are something I'd check those every Friday or every Monday and just make sure that you're getting them on your schedule. I have asked Rachel to begin loading those into everybody's Google Calendar with the links and everything. So my hope is that that'll make it easier for you guys to have them on your schedule. And so Rachel will begin doing that here shortly as well. So I am going to share my screen here because I have a couple of updates. Now, for those of you that were in our Indiana sales team meeting on Friday, some of this content was from that meeting, but obviously everybody in the territory didn't have an opportunity to see some of this. And so I'm not going to spend a ton of time, but there are some updates that I want to make you aware of. First of all, we are at the very end of our 2024 contest year. For those of you that are new on the call, our contest year really runs from, the idea is that it runs from March 1st through the end of February, but obviously this week is kind of the last week. So the final numbers are flowing in. I don't trust the numbers on the Resource Center until late Tuesday night, usually early Wednesday morning. So those should be kind of the preliminary final numbers for the contest year. If you remember, if you're in the top 175 agents in the country, you have an opportunity to attend our celebration event in Austin, Texas this year. It'll be an awesome event. We will have some wildcard opportunities, I hope, as well. I usually get a couple of wildcard opportunities to take people who maybe didn't earn their way there, but are up and coming in the organization. So I'll be reaching out about those in the coming weeks. But I just wanted to make sure that you guys can understand our new contest year kind of is beginning here at the end of this week, and we'll move forward from there. So here March 1st, everybody starts at 0. You guys are tied with Gary Boberhoff and Derek Mabry and Ray Plagans, everybody at 0, right, on 3-1. And then we'll begin to, build through that. And for those of you that are new, the reason that we do that and we have our contest here on a 2-week offset is because a lot of the business that we write during the fourth quarter flows into our commission systems and FYCRs and everything in January and February. And so we want to make sure to capture all of that incoming business that we did during the fourth quarter, to make sure that that's all getting counted on last year's contest year. So that's the reason, the why behind it. We do have our tier qualifications do change slightly each year. This has been something that's going on for a long time. It's just an inflationary bump that happens. So starting on 3-1, the tier 2 qualification is not changing. But to get to tier 3, you've got to hit 115,000 rolling 12-month FYCRs. And to get to tier 4, you've got to hit 230,000. And so those are just a small single-digit bump for next year. So for the starting March 1st, these are the numbers right here that you have to be at tier 2, tier 3, or tier 4. And that is kind of reevaluated at the end of each month. So that's kind of how that works. A couple of other things that I wanted to point out here. I'm just going to jump ahead. So for those of you who aren't aware of what we've done a lot of great things from a territory perspective. And this was the national numbers and where we landed as a territory. We are the AM South Bend, that stands for Agency Manager South Bend Territory. And you guys can see last year, this was the cash flow that our territory received. So this is money that was deposited into agents and leaders' pockets, right? So we moved from 11.4 million to 13.4 million, a little over a $2 million increase, which was 18% growth over the previous year. You can see the national average was 18%. It is fun to see what we're doing overall as an organization. We moved up from 151 million in total commissions paid out to 179 million, which is a $27 million increase year over year. So it's fun to know that it's not just our territory that is having incredible growth year over year, but it's the entire nation. And I think that speaks to the Health Markets platform. I think it speaks to the currencies that the organization brings to the table. And it is why I've chosen to hang my shingle with Health Markets for the last 24 years. When we look back over the last 10 years, we've been averaging around 20% increases in agent compensation year over year over year. And I will tell you, many of the agents on our team are getting up there in the stratosphere. We have several agents who are over $1 million now, which is kind of crazy to say. $1 million in income. And the thing that I tell new agents as we get started in the business is that whatever high watermark you hit in a year from a compensation perspective, that's not flash in the pan money. Because next year, as long as you're doing things right, your income should be whatever you made this year plus some, right? That's the beauty of residual income. That's the beauty of the snowball effect. That's the beauty of layering commissions and renewals on top of previous commissions and renewals. And that's the beauty of our business. And I've lived there for 24 years, half of my life now. I'm 48. I can't believe that I say that. I said that in training last week, and it blew my mind that I've been here half of my life. But it is fun to see what we did this last year. And then this is probably the most fun slide that I'll share, because this is actually a breakdown of what our agency, like the entire Health Markets agency, did and what the cash growth was. And you can see all active agents, averaged 18%. So this is all agents. This is from those of you who have written one policy to those of you that are high tier 4 status. That average growth was 18%. And the average agent, even counting brand new agents, was about $79,000 in income. That was the average. The top 1,000 agents averaged $167,000 in income. The top 500 agents in the nation averaged $272,000. The top 100 agents, we have a lot of agents in the top 100 in our territory, but averaged $617,000. And the top 10 agents in the nation not only averaged almost 1.2 million, but they were up 19% year over year. And the bigger these numbers get, guys, the harder it should be to have an 18, 20% increase year over year. But I think it just speaks to the fact that even our top agents are finding ways to grow tremendously every single year. So that's really, really fun to look at and really fun to see. The other thing that I wanted to point out to you guys was what our January cash flow looked like. I know we're at the end of February. I don't have the numbers for February quite yet, but this is our territory. And this was 2025, January of 2025 versus January of 2024. And you can see that this is just looking at 1 month. So it's just one of 12 data points that we'll have by the end of the year. But you can see in this 1 month, we had a 19% increase. So last year we averaged an 18% increase across the board. January alone, it was 19% higher than it was the previous year. And I think it's really fun to look at the kinds of cash flow that people saw. Many of the agents in our territory and across the country are they've got a lot of cash sitting in their bank accounts today. We had 2 agents that were over 150,000 in cash flow just for the month of January. We had 6 that were over 100,000, 11 that were over 75,000, 17 that were over 50,000, 28 that were over 25,000, and 42 agents that made over 10 grand in the month of January alone. And I do put this disclaimer down at the bottom because several of our major carriers down in or up in Michigan didn't pay yet. So like Priority Health and Blue Cross and Blue Shield, that money didn't even flow until February. So these numbers were not counting some of the big carriers, especially in the state of Michigan, that we actually received quite a bit of cash flow from and quite a bit of commissions from. So I show you guys that because many of you are new. I just want you to understand the size and scope of this opportunity. I don't want this opportunity to pass any of you by either. I don't want any of you to look back in 5 years or 10 years and think about what could have been or what you might have missed. I think we're on an incredible trajectory. We've got an incredible base of currencies that we provide. We're trying to pour into you in many, many different ways. And I just encourage you, engage in the new agent roundtables, engage in these ADTs. You're here today, so I appreciate that. But engage in the team meetings, engage in the trainings that are being hosted. There's a lot of different ways that you can engage. I'm muting a few people. Sorry, we had some background noise. So if you're not muted, I'm muting you. So just that's probably my biggest advice is just engage, where you can. So I'm going to mute everybody, and then Cav, you can unmute just to make sure we've got everybody muted because there was some background noise there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Mr. Stephen Cavajola for the rest of the morning. Cav, I think I've got screen sharing capability set up, and Cav's really going to be discussing today, how you work the phones. And that's kind of, the core of this. I will say as Cav gets started that one of the things that I teach and train and tell new agents, and I talk to agents about this when I'm interviewing them, there are 3 things that we do in this business that drive revenue. And this is where your focus and your effort has to be put. We market our businesses, we schedule appointments, and we run appointments. Those are the 3 things that we do. Now, there's a lot that happens inside of each one of those 3 pieces of the business, but working the phones is a big piece of this. I don't think you can find tremendous success in this business without effectively working the phones, texting, emailing. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we, work the phones or do these outreach. But Cav's going to try to shed some light on this for us today. Steve, I appreciate you being here as always. From here on out, the floor is yours, my friend.
All righty. So my screen's showing up, right? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about working the phones. And I agree with Silas. It is it's an important part of our business. I think it's changing a little bit on how important it is. But again, you're always going to need to use the phones. And so before we get started on like scripts and stuff like that, I just want to give you some thoughts that I put together on working the phone. And the first thing, I guess, is working the phones can be mentally draining. It could sometimes be not that fun. So understand it's mentally draining, and don't take the results personally. Again, I think just because of what's going on in our industry, the fact that the Affordable Care Act was passed that kind of pigeonholed a lot of people's buying into a certain amount of time. It's harder and harder to schedule appointments over the phone. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Again, people are being bombarded by agents all over the country, so they're probably not going to be very nice to you. Again, guys, if they give you crap on the phone, it's not because you called. It's because you're the 50th person to call. Okay. And again, we just, if you let the phones affect your attitude, it's going to affect your business. So, if you're not mentally sharp, find something else to do. When I work the phones, I can work the phones efficiently for about an hour to an hour and a half, and then I've got to find something else to do. Me personally, I just feel that if I'm if I'm more than an hour, hour and a half with the phones at one time, I start to get, just mentally fatigued. I'm not as sharp. And so I'll work phones for about an hour, hour and a half, and then I'll find something else to do. Okay. Second thing is don't look at the phones as an appointment setting activity. Look at the phones as a marketing activity, because if you go into working the phones in this day and age as an appointment setting activity and you dial the phone 100 times and nobody answers the phone, you get all these voicemails and you don't set very many appointments, you could walk away from that thinking you didn't have a good session. But if you look at the fact that every time I dial the phone, I get a point, regardless of what happens. I mean, if it's a disconnected number, I get a point. If they tell me to fly a kite, I get a point. If I schedule an appointment, I get a point. If you start looking at this as an activity where I can dial the phone and get points for my PTS, because that's the only thing I can control is how much activity I do. And I can also leave voicemails, which is another point. You're going to get some appointments when you work the phones, but if you go in thinking I'm trying to set appointments, you're going to be disappointed. And if you're disappointed, it's going to affect everything. So I always go in with the attitude, it's a marketing activity. It's not an appointment setting activity. That has just helped free me up tremendously. Okay. The other thing we need to understand is their caller ID is a deflector shield. Okay. Again, some of you young people on the phone, you don't realize this, but there was a time when the phones were attached to the wall with a cord, and the phone would ring and we would jump over the couch, knock down a lamp to see who was on the line. Now we could be sitting right next to our phone, it can ring, and we go back to watching Netflix. I mean, it's a different world we live in now. And I'll never forget, Silas had a lady that talks about using the phones, Gail Goodman, and she talked about most people, if they don't know you, they're not going to answer the phone. Okay. And so, and I thought about that, and it's true. If someone calls me and I don't recognize the number, I don't answer. If it's important, I can leave a message. Heck, most of my friends and family call. I don't answer. Hey, if you need me, leave me a message. I'll get back to you on my time. But again, we've got this caller ID now where if people don't recognize the number, they're not going to answer the phone. And so what we need to learn how to do is we need to learn how to communicate with other means. So yes, we still need to dial the phone, but we need to start leaving voicemails. Not every time you call, but a few times. We need to start texting. When we did the training a couple weeks ago talking about internet leads, I shared that graph where texting is the communication of our time. Okay. Most people want to deal with businesses who text. They respond quicker to text. So if we're a person that, I don't text, I don't like to text, you're going to have to get over that. You're going to have to learn that skill, because it's how until we can communicate mental telepathy, texting is probably going to take over as the primary mode of communication. I think it's hilarious. My kids don't know how to talk on the phone. They don't have phone etiquette. They don't know how to say hello. It's like, my daughter will call me. She don't even wait for me to say hello. She's just asking me for money or something before I even say anything. But these kids can text like there's nobody's business, because that's how they communicate. And then there's email. And so when I think about that for a second, depending on the generation you're marketing to, we all have our primary mode of communication. So again, the younger generation now, it's all about texting. I mean, you call, my kids don't even have a voicemail, a message on their thing. It's just a generic thing because they don't call people. It's all texting. But then you've got the kind of my age, we kind of grew up on the email, so I still prefer to communicate email. And then the older generation, those are the people that like to talk. A lot of times they will answer the phone. But I look at it from the standpoint is we have got to learn to communicate in all areas. So again, when I get a lead, because everyone kind of freaks out on, God, Silas and Steve and Sandra, they want us to do 750 points. Well, if I get an internet lead and I dial it, I text it, I email and voicemail, that's one lead, that's 4 points. So if I get 25 leads, I could get 100 to 200 points just doing those activities. Okay, because again, what did I say earlier? Our activities are the only things we can control. Okay. So understand when you call people most of the time, they're probably not going to answer. So how can I communicate with them to let them know that I'm out there? And then finally, don't be like all other agents calling. You have got to learn to do pattern interrupts to separate yourself. Because again, what did I say earlier? If we're calling internet leads, they're getting bombarded by agents all over the country. So what are some things that we can do to separate ourselves? Well, first of all, if I'm calling quote unquote local leads, I can let them know I'm the local agent. That's a pattern interrupt. Instead of assuming they're looking for health insurance, I can assume they're not looking. And so I ask them if it's a mistake. Those are just little things you can do that'll totally separate yourself from everybody else's that's calling. And so if you will learn to do some pattern interrupts, again, is it going to drastically change your response rate? No. But if it gets you an extra 5 to 10 sales a year, is it worth it? Of course. So before I move into some scripting and stuff, Silas, is there any comments you want to make on anything I said here, or did I miss anything?
No, I don't think you missed anything. I don't, and I would also say, and this goes back to a little bit about what we talked about last week too, is your success working the phones is probably going to be very directly related to the quality of leads that you're actually working, right? So if you're calling, I think you should in the beginning, you should be calling vendor internet leads and really any name and number that you can. But as time goes on, and you get to the point like we talked about last week where you've built a referral practice and the majority of the phone calls you're making are responding to referrals that have called you and said they want to set up an appointment, it becomes way more fun to work the phones. I'd also say that I do think that consumer behavior has changed, and I said this last week, but people who are more savvy consumers have moved away from putting their information into a form online because they know what that leads to, and they are doing things like Googling local representatives or talking to their board members or centers of influence to find referrals to people. And this is where, kind of tying in what we talked about the last couple of weeks, building your Google reviews, getting those 5-star reviews built up and building your local presence becomes really, really important. And in the beginning, you are going to have to do a lot of dialing and you're going to probably have lesser success because you're dialing things like internet leads. It's a wonderful way to practice. It's a wonderful way to find deals. You got to farm a little bit harder though. As you begin to migrate your practice towards more of a referral based and local marketing, and you have people calling you, it does become much, much easier. I remember Angie Pius, who's one of our top tier 4 agents today. She came into the business many years ago. And I remember I was always a little bit frustrated because she didn't have the dial count that I thought she should have, but she was working very, very hard to market and network herself at a very high level. And so when I would look at her actual numbers, though, she may only make 30 or 40 phone calls in a week, but every 3 to 4 times she dialed the phone, she was scheduling an appointment because they were very high quality leads that she was calling. There were people who had raised their hand and said, Angie, I want to talk to you. So you want to get to that point, but it does take some time. So that would be the only commentary I would have. I think if you're not having success dialing the phones, you got to start looking at your lead quality. And there's a lot you can do to boost your lead quality through some of the techniques we've taught the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and again, again, we're going to talk a little bit about calling internet leads and stuff today, but I mentioned this at the new rep training last week where through the whole 28 years I've been here, the people who complain about the leads the most are the ones that market their business the least because they're dependent on someone else. And our whole philosophy, Silas and Sandra, we all agree, you got to kind of have a holistic approach. I got to spend some time on the phones. I got to call some internet leads. I got to take some live transfers at some point. But I got to get out and I got to market my own business. I got to start creating that local presence so they don't have to do this. Because again, the other thing I talk about is, when you're a new rep, one of the things we have to do is we have to embrace the suck. I mean, everybody is going to start this business. It's something brand new for most of us. And quite frankly, the beginning sucks. Okay. Everyone's going to go through some sort of suck, but how long we go through it is up to us. And the people that don't learn how to cultivate their own leads, they go through the suck a lot longer, and sometimes they don't get out of it. They have to go somewhere else because they're just not happy, they're not satisfied. But when people start cranking this thing out and they start getting their own leads and they get referrals, they love this business. And so that's this whole idea. And again, our attitude can make or break how we do it. So that's why I started off with this right here, because you can have the best phone script in the world. If your attitude's poor when it comes to the phones, you're not going to do very well. And so these are just some things that have really helped me kind of refocus and get to the point where I don't mind the phones. Because guys, I'll be the first to admit it. For many years, I hated the phones. I hated people yelling at me. I didn't like calling people. I don't mind calling people that I know they want my help. But man, when I had to call and see, I hated it. And I would find things to do to avoid it. And so that's where I got really good at marketing and really did that. But I still understood that the phones are a valuable part of what we do. It's still part of what I do, but it doesn't affect my mental state like it used to. There's no emotional responses at all other than positive. Because if I call somebody and they tell me they're not looking, that's what I thought. Okay. But if they tell me they are looking, then I can qualify the process. So what I'm going to do is we're going to cover a couple of things. The first thing that I'm going to cover is I'm going to kind of show you how I call out, because again, I don't do a lot of live transfer. So I do still call internet leads. I still do call people who respond to me. So we're going to talk about that first, and I'm going to kind of show you how I do it. And then Silas and Sandra can kind of pitch in. And then we're going to talk about live transfers. And I'll be the first to admit, I don't do live transfers. I haven't done live transfers in a long time. But a lot of people in our company have succeeded with live transfers, and we have a script that if you become familiar with it, it will work for you. But let's talk about, first of all, just kind of how I work leads. And again, there's basically two leads I work. There's internet leads, and then there's people who contact me. Okay. It doesn't matter who I'm dealing with. The very first thing I want to do is I want to verify the need. I want to see if this lead is legit. And again, I do it with a pattern interrupt, because I'm going to show you a script a little bit later when we get into live transfers to show you how most people are doing this. So I'm going to show you how I do it, and then we get the other one, and you'll see the difference and see which one would you be more comfortable with. Because there's no right or wrong way to do this, guys. Again, I always got to put in a disclaimer. I'm just going to show you how I do it, which is a way. It's not the way. If you want to use it, use it. If you don't, you don't. It's just an example of how you can do this, but it's worked very well for me for several years. And so if I'm calling an internet lead, I just say, hey, hi, this is Steve Cavajola, and I'm a local insurance agent with Health Markets. I'm sorry to bother you, but this number was sent to me recently. Was this a mistake, or was someone looking for help with insurance? Guys, when we break this down again, this is a pattern interrupt. First of all, I deal locally. I work about a 5 or 6 county area. I don't cover multiple states. If you're one of these people that are calling multiple states, you probably don't want to say you're a local insurance agent if you live in Indiana and you're calling someone in Georgia. But how you could change that is, instead of I'm a local insurance agent, I'm a Georgia area insurance agent, or I cover the Georgia, whatever. Just by using local or using a state or something, it kind of, if it's a word they recognize, it kind of keeps them captivated. Okay. I'm sorry to bother you. How many people that are calling these internet leads are apologizing for bothering them? I would guess not very many. Okay, which is a pattern interrupt. I'm sorry to bother you, but this number was sent to me recently. Was this a mistake, or was someone looking for help? When I started to incorporate was this a mistake several years ago, something drastic changed. I quit having people rip me a new one over the phone. Matter of fact, when I say I'm a local insurance agent, I can start hearing sometimes, I can hear their blood start to boil because they're about ready to let me have it. And then when I say, was this a mistake or was someone looking for help with insurance? It was a mistake. Okay, sorry to bother you. Oh, no problem. I mean, it totally diffuses the whole situation because I'm treating them with respect. I'm not coming into this call assuming they're looking. I'm assuming they're not looking. And so when they tell me they're not, they say it's a mistake. And a lot of times they'll respond back to my text. It's a mistake. I don't even have to call that person. Okay. But if they tell me, no, I'm looking, that's a positive response. And so then I'll say, well, what's going on? How can I help? And they'll start explaining their situation. So that is how I handle internet leads. I'm a local agent. I'm sorry to bother you. This number was sent to me recently. Was this a mistake? Or were you looking for help with some sort of insurance? And if they say they're not looking, they've got it taken care of, whatever, okay, sorry to bother you. No problem. Okay. Matter of fact, some of you watch a video that I have in the training where I actually do a call session. And I can't remember if it's this, if it's in that video, but there was a video I recorded one time where you could tell the lady just kept the conversation going, even though she wasn't looking. And I kind of stopped when I got off the call, I said, all she kept telling me is how I was the nicest person that's called her because everybody else was assuming she was looking, and she kept thanking me for being so respectful and just asking if it was a mistake. I'm telling you guys, people are not prepared for this. And if you're getting bombarded on the phone, because again, people are getting all these calls, they're not going to be in a very good mood when they answer. This is something that can kind of diffuse that. Okay. Now, if I'm calling an inbound lead, which is someone contacted me, they texted me, they emailed, they called and left a message, so they want me to call them back. These are the things we're looking for, right? We want to get to the point where we don't have to call very many internet leads because all of our phone time is calling people who actually want us to call them back, right? That's all the ultimate goal. But when I call those people, I still give them some respect. And I'll just say, hey, this is Steve Cavajola with Health Markets. I'm just getting back to you. Do you still need help with some insurance? Because sometimes they may have found it. You know, they looked for me on Google, they did something else. So again, I never assume anybody's looking. I'm always verifying the need, whether it's an internet lead or an inbound lead. So is there any questions or comments on this first step? Or Silas, Sandra, do you guys want to add anything?
No, I think it's simple. I think it's easy. I think that when you guys go back and look at the New Agent Handbook, we actually have some of the scripting in there along with the process for working a lead. You don't have to do it exactly like we recommend, but it's just a sample of what it should be. I do think, this is the first step, but the big thing about any of these leads is you have to have a robust follow-up process. And when you have a process, I think it takes a lot of the emotion out of the work that you're doing, because regardless of what happens, you're just filtering and siphoning leads and putting them in the right bucket and scheduling the appropriate follow-ups. And it's just a process, right? So I think that does really help as well. So this is the first step, obviously.
Yep. First step is verify the need. So once you find out there is a need, then I move to step number 2, which is schedule the appointment. Okay. And so the way that I handle it is once they tell me what's going on, they left their job, whatever. Well, again, I'm with Health Markets, which is one of the largest independent agencies in the country, and we've been helping people locally for over 30 years. Since we have access to several of the nation's top-rated insurance companies, we usually meet by appointment only so we can make sure we find the right plan for your situation. Now, there is no cost or obligation for my help. I get compensated by the insurance companies if we find a plan that works for you. So when would be a good time for us to get together for about 30 to 45 minutes to review your options? Mornings, afternoons, or evenings? And so again, first thing I'm doing is I'm building credibility by introducing Health Markets. We are one of the largest independent agencies in the country, and we have been helping people locally for 30 years. We have. I know some of you have only been helping people for 30 minutes. They don't need to know that. Use the length of time that we've been around to build credibility. So what's the credibility? We are one of the largest independent agencies in the country, and we've been around for a long time. Now, since we have access to several of the nation's top-rated companies, we usually meet by appointment only. Why? So we can make sure we find the right plan for your situation. That's the benefit to meeting with us, is we want to find the right plan for your situation. It's called a fact finder. We're going to talk about that more next week. Now, this is a very important statement. There is no cost or obligation for my help. I get compensated by the insurance companies if we find a plan that works for you. Why is that important? The reason most people try and do this on their own is they think it's going to cost them money. Because whenever they deal with a professional, it costs them money. How many of you go to your doctor for free? How many of you deal with an accountant for free, a lawyer for free, a therapist, whatever? And so a lot of times these people want to do this on their own. And usually the reason they're calling us, and for those of you who've been in the new rep training, we talked about the modern buyer who, what they do is they try and do this on their own. They get overwhelmed with information. And so they're coming to us reluctantly because they need someone to kind of decipher all the noise. And so but they don't want to pay for it. That's why Sandler talked about lie, steal, lie, and hide. Step number 2 is they want unpaid consultants. This sentence is actually playing into the Sandler buyer system. Because again, it's I want to gather information. I'm looking for unpaid consulting. And so I use that knowledge against them by just saying there's no cost or obligation for my help. I get compensated by the insurance companies. And they're like, an unpaid consultant. Okay. And then when would be a good time for us to get together for about 30 to 45 minutes? Guys, that's a mini upfront contract right there. Because if I schedule an appointment, when can we get together? And I show up at Silas's office and he's like, you got 10 minutes because I got to run to another deal. Whose fault was that? So I just tell people up front, I'm going to need about 30 to 45 minutes. When would be a good time to do this? And then mornings, afternoons, and evenings. And then, because again, the reason that's important to me is I only do evenings on Wednesday night. So if they say evenings, it's Wednesdays. Okay. But once they tell me mornings, afternoons, evenings, my next question is, would you like to do this face-to-face or virtually? Again, the way that I choose to do business is I don't do anything over the phone the first time. We're going to do it face-to-face. Now, the face-to-face can be virtual or it can be in person. But one of the things I'm doing when I interact with people is I'm not trying to sell them anything. I'm trying to develop a relationship, because if I develop a relationship with these people and they stick around with me for a long time, Silas just showed you the kind of money you can make when you fully understand residual income. This isn't about making a sale today. It's about creating a client for life. It's hard to do that when you really don't know that person. Would we all agree with that? If you're just a voice over a phone, so again, if I'm in Indiana and I'm talking to someone in Arizona, which again, some people do that, But do you think it's harder for them to develop that relationship versus someone that you can actually drive to their house or they can come to you? So again, initially, do we need to sell over multiple states? Maybe. But is that ultimately what we want to do our whole career? Some do. I don't. I want to build a local presence because that's where I get my referrals, that's where I get my Google reviews, and that's where I find my new people. I'm finding I don't travel nearly as much as I used to. I mean, Silas and I remember the days we were putting 25, 30,000 miles on our car every single year. We don't do that anymore. I think last year I put like 8 or 9,000 business miles on my car because people want to come to you. They'll do it virtually. So it's kind of cool. I had to drive to Munster for an appointment last night, and I'm like, I hate driving on 94. This kind of sucks. So I embraced the suck like I tell all you two, and I sold a couple Medicare deals. But the bottom line is the very first time I talk to somebody, we're going to do it face to face. And if they don't want to do that, I really don't want to do business with them. That's just my choice. I know as new people, you got to meet with everybody you can meet with right now for practice and all that. But eventually you should get to the point where you pick and choose who you meet with. Silas, what's your comment? Choose what pond you're going to fish in. Okay. We can get to the point where we can start being selective on who we meet with once we get down the road. Now, if they tell me they want to meet face to face, since I do have an office, my question is, would you like me to come to you or would you like to come to my office? I always let them pick. And the first option is not, would you like to come to my office? Would you like me to come to you? Or would you like to come to my office? Now, for some of you that are new that you don't have an office, and again, I worked out of my house for 7 years before COVID hit. And it was like, would you like me to come to your home or would you prefer to meet somewhere else, like a Starbucks or something like that? Okay. But I always let them decide. Now, I do know that there are some people that they don't want to meet. They just want a quote. And instead of me going to work for them and printing all this stuff out and email it to them or whatever, that I know is not going to go anywhere 99% of the time, I'll just ask them, okay, that's fine. I can text or email you a link to my quoting site so you can do some shopping. Would you prefer a text or an email? And what am I sending them? Health Sherpa has an agent URL. So if I have someone who doesn't want to meet with me and they just want a quote, I don't do the quote for them. I shoot them a link and I let them do the work. And again, sometimes they'll call me back because when they go and they still don't understand what all this stuff means. They may reach out to me, but I'm not wasting my time with someone who's probably not going to buy anything from me. Okay. So the third step is, at this point, I would actually go, if we do schedule an appointment, we get on that, I'll start the fact finder. We're going to spend all next week on the fact finder if I read the schedule correctly. So before I move on to live transfers, is there any questions, any comments on kind of this approach to working leads?
No questions right now in the chat, Steve.
Okay. Silas, do you have anything you add, or should we jump into the live transfers?
No, the only thing I would add is as new agents, I think you have to be a student of your business. I say that often, but I think you need to practice this stuff over and over and over and over and over. Practice is going to make it not sound scripted and just be much better. And you can obviously practice in a setting where you're not talking to anybody. Another way to practice is make a couple hundred phone calls to internet leads and start engaging with people, right? Cav and I have said this for a long time. The way you get good at working the phones is work the phones. Like, make a bunch of phone calls.
You get good on the phones by making a bunch of bad phone calls. I mean, because they don't know what you're supposed to say.
Right. And they don't know you from Adam, and it's okay. Most of you, your sales leader or myself, are funding your leads in the beginning anyway. It's okay to work your way through this, but you're not going to get good at it until you do it. And, I will say, as new agents get started, and I know there's different ways to work the phones and work leads and do a lot of different marketing things, but I would really tell you, if I was starting today, I would have enough dialing sessions scheduled each week, whether it's an hour and a half or 2 hours at a time, but I would have those dialing sessions scheduled on my map of life. And I would have it set up so that I could find a way to make 250 or 300 phone dials in a week. In the beginning, that is where you need to start, is my opinion. Now, can you text? Can you do other things? Absolutely. But I know for many years, I feel like if you're making 250 to 300 phone dials, I can't tell you you're going to have 10, 12, 15 appointments out of that. I don't know. It depends on how good you are on the phone and what the quality of the leads are. But I guarantee you're going to get better at the process, and you're going to get better at the verbiage, and you're going to have more conversations. I mean, the more you do, the more you get, right? So I just think you got to think about it. When you're breaking out how you're going to build out your map of life, which is one of the things we ask you to do in the very beginning, I think dialing sessions have to be time dedicated to themselves, because it's really hard to do anything else when you're dialing the phones and documenting those calls and scheduling follow-ups, or whatever process you're using. It's hard to be doing anything else. You got to have those dialing times in your schedule, 90 minutes to 2 hours, multiple throughout the week, scattered at different times a day. And then separate from that, you can have your appointment/marketing time. Obviously, if you have an appointment, that's going to take priority in that time. But if you don't have an appointment, it turns into marketing time, right? And I would just tell you, that's how I think you should structure your schedule, so that you're finding a way to spend 35 to 40 hours a week marketing your business, scheduling appointments, and running appointments. It's not rocket science, but I feel like a lot of new agents fall down and stumble and don't do that. And they're just not doing enough work to get themselves off the ground. So that's the very basic core scheduling platform that I would suggest you use.
Well, and again, just to add to that, I think people make this more complicated. If you just make a commitment to dial the phone 50 times a day for 5 days, there's 250. Now, if I block out a couple hours for phone session, I can dial the phone 50 times. I can call leads, I can call business cards, I can leave whatever. I think we take these numbers and we make them extremely harder than they need to be. I like to break things down into daily or hourly things. So again, one of the things that I do is I usually have one phone session a day. I spend about an hour, hour and a half, and I'm dialing the phone probably 30 to 50 times. And then I go do something else. Okay. Now, the other thing that I want to share before we move on to this is this right here is my phone script that I just showed you. Guys, I've been doing this for 28 years, and I can say this stuff in my sleep, but I still have this crutch right next to my computer because it keeps me on task. But more importantly, if you say the same thing over and over and over again, you're going to become an expert at it, and it's going to sound natural. Now, as I move into this call script, if I had to do this the first time, it's not going to sound very natural. But eventually, this can become second nature too. So this is the Health Markets Agent call script, and it's basically was designed by some offices that are killing it with live transfers, okay? But the first thing I want to show you is for leads that are not a live transfer, okay? An internet lead. And I want you to listen to this compared to how I did it. Hi, my name is Steve with Health Markets. How are you doing today? Great. The reason for my call is because you recently inquired online about your health coverage. And since I'm licensed in Ohio, I represent many of the local insurance carriers there. They sent me your information to see what I could do to help you out. Do you think this is teeing it up for them to blast you if they never did anything because it's a recycled lead or something like that? Or
I just think about someone lobbing a softball in a high arc towards somebody's Cav standing there with his bat ready to knock this thing out of the park. I mean, that's like, I think you're teeing it up for yeah. I think the process
this is what most people are saying. So when you compare that to what I say, that's a pattern interrupt. They're not saying what we're saying. So that's why I'm saying if you're getting a lot of negativity on the phone, it's probably because your script sounds something like that. So let's move on. So again, for the live transfers, again, that one you're just answering the phone. Thank you for calling the Health Markets Insurance Agency. This is Steve. How can I help you? They're going to tell you what's going on. No problem. I'm a licensed agent and I represent many of the local insurance carriers. I'm happy to help you if I can. Do you have an agent you work with now, or are you trying to figure this out on your own? Okay. What's got you looking for coverage? Okay, we can help with that. One of the things I'd like to point out is I'm a local licensed agent, not a call center. I'd get local out of there if you're calling a different state. I can provide personalized service, and you can contact me anytime with questions about your coverage. And when I help you, I will be able to help you every year after this. So again, you're kind of establishing in a different scenario, hey, let's build a relationship here. Okay. Um, and then you go to the next page and you start kind of doing a fact finder. You start gathering information because a live transfer, you're not trying to set an appointment. You're trying to make a sale right then and there. And so this is kind of the way that you could go through and do this. Now, for sake of time, I'm not going to go through all of this with you, but this is a nice little script. And again, it's got a thing that you can kind of turn into trying to talk about the supplemental stuff and stuff like that. But guys, I'll tell you, live transfers, they're a great way to start building your business. But selling over the phone, it's hard for subs in life. I'm just going to be honest, it's harder. It's easier if you're face-to-face with people or virtual with people. So again, just kind of going, because I've talked to people who were doing the live trans during the open enrollment, and they're like, well, I couldn't get any interest in the supplemental products. I know. It's the nature of the beast. It's open enrollment. They're calling about health insurance. They don't really want to talk about all this stuff. But again, it's just something that as you start doing this, you'll kind of get a flavor for it. So there is someone on the call that is much more experienced at this than me, and he doesn't even know I'm going to tell him this, but Justin, unmute, please, because you used to do everything over the phone with your previous company. And when we said 200 to 300 phone calls, you laughed at us like we were kindergartners. Because tell them a little bit about your experience over the phone with your previous job.
Yeah, it was so I worked from home. I worked in 30 different states. And I worked on an auto dialer. So the phone would ring, it'd either go to voicemail, or somebody would answer. And if they answered, I'd qualify the caller, and try to make a sale and do the enrollment within 15 to 20 minutes. So everything was very quick. Didn't really have time to build a rapport. With the auto dialer, I was doing 250 to 300 calls a day, which when you're not building a rapport like we are here, I think in the 3 years I was there, I maybe had one or two referrals. Now going through open enrollment with Health Markets, I'm blown away at how many referrals I've had. It's been great. So yeah, the amount of calls, you're just churning and burning.
So now that you still use you use live transfers for
Yeah.
Health Markets, correct? So what
Yeah,
did you kind of follow that script, or did you kind of figure out your own thing?
I kind of, it's hard to break habits. It's hard to break bad habits. And that's been my struggle, I think, is, I had 3 years to develop that churn and burn habits that I've had learned. So I follow your scripts from your lessons. But then once I make that initial contact, that initial connect, then I just kind of do my own thing. I just have a conversation with them and go from there. But the live transfers have been great. I just had a sale this morning with somebody from Florida, and it was quick. The call, I think, lasted about 45 minutes. Not as quick as I was doing previously, but I didn't like that. I didn't enjoy that because I didn't get to have a chance to make that connection and rapport with my clients. So I was able to explain a lot more to this client this morning and, help her understand her situation. And, I think I've got a client that's going to stick with me, and hopefully I'll get some referrals as well.
Yeah, guys, it's okay that if you're doing this over the phone, you're doing this over multiple states, you don't have to do everything in one sale. You get their trust, sell the health, whatever, and just ask them, hey, there's some other things we can talk about. Can we schedule a follow-up call or just something like that instead of, thinking I got to do it all right then and there. So Silas, I know you've talked to some people nationwide. Live transfers are a big deal. So what are some of your comments on live transfers? Because again, we both admit we don't do it.
Right. So I did have a great conversation last week. I'm actually in a study group with Cliff Karthauser, and he's put 14 of the top sales leaders in the country together into this group. And so we met, last week was the second time that we actually met. And I led the discussion, but it was really around what our top sales leaders across the country doing to help new agents get up and running. And I will say, one of the most common things across the top builders in the nation, and I'm talking, if you guys know these names, Daniel Smith, Johnny Pineda, John Jacoby, they're three of the best in the country, and they do a really great job of getting new agents up and running. And all of them said a big piece of this is live transfers in the beginning, because these are people that are calling in with a need. In many situations, these live transfers are not always looking to buy insurance, but there is still opportunities within that, because if they're calling us or calling into our number, it probably means they don't have an agent. And so I think that is one of the big things that they talked about is whatever the problem is that they're asking you to help them with. I think one of the first things is, well, why didn't you call your agent to ask to help you with this? Oh, you don't have an agent? Okay, well, this is what I do. I'm happy to help you, but I do need to, become your agent of record or whatever it is, to be able to actually assist you in getting your 1095 or getting your insurance card or updating your application or whatever it might be, whatever it is that they need. So I think the common theme is that, we are, Daniel Smith actually has a call center in Florida. He has 9 sub agents that work for him, and he has a sales team on top of that. But his entire call center runs exclusively off of live transfers across multiple states. And he said they're closing 25 to 30% of those live transfers. And so that's a pretty good closing ratio when you look at a lead source. If you can sell 2.5 or 3 out of every 10 that you buy and you're getting new clients, I think it is a uniquely different type of opportunity than Cav and I ever had. We haven't had live transfers forever. I mean, these are relatively new types of leads. And I think by the time live transfers got introduced to health markets, many of our top agents had already built a referral practice. And so we never needed to use the live transfers. But I thank Justin and others for, getting out there and using it and figuring it out. I do know there are deals in there. I would say when we talk about successes with live transfers, many times it's early morning and into the afternoon or evening hours where they are the highest closing percentages. So, I think about you guys' situation as a new agent. Why not turn on those live transfers from 6 a.m. to 9:30 or 10 a.m. and then jump into making your outbound phone dials, your marketing, your other aspects of the business that you're trying to run, and then turning those live transfers back on in the late afternoon into the evening hours. Some of you, if you want to work till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, I know when I started in the business, I was a single guy and I didn't have much else to do in the evening. So I worked, I would grind at night. So for those of you that are willing and able to do that, I think there are some great opportunities inside of those live transfers. I think in the beginning though, success is achieved through 1,000 different tactics. Somebody said that to me a couple of years ago and it just really hit home. Success is achieved through 1,000 different tactics. And I think you've got to have a lot of irons in the fire. There's no magic bullet here. But I think I would be taking live transfers if I was in your shoes. I would be taking internet leads if I was in your shoes. I'd be shooting for 250 to 300 phone dials a week. I would be working on hitting, 750 to 1,000 points on the PTS, which are a combination of all of that. I would be doing walk and talks into Small Business America and implementing a robust follow-up process to include getting them into my CRM so I can start drip marketing on them. I would be networking. I would be getting involved in BNI groups. I mean, all these things and all these tools that we're telling you about are things that you can pull together and build your own plan. You don't have to do all of them. I don't think you can do all of them. But a lot of what we want you to do is build out your business plan. You are a self-employed small business owner, and this business will fly or die based on what you do or don't do. So build a plan and execute the plan. I know that sounds so simple, but that's where I see a lot of new agents fail is they don't build the plan or they don't execute it or they don't track the key metrics in it, right? And so I just want to encourage and push you guys. That's what it takes to be successful in this business. Cav?
Well, and the other thing that I would add is also, I think, an untapped area that we could probably really do well is we have got to start hitting people we know, but not the way that most insurance agents do it. The two things we got to do is, number one, you got to send out that center of influence letter asking for referrals, not asking for business. But if you ask for referrals, you may get referrals, and you're also going to find some people say, well, I need your help. I didn't know you did all that. And the second thing is going to those people we care about, asking them if we can practice on them, and really try to start selling some of these supplemental income protection products, because our friends and family need them. 82% of all working Americans have no income protection. And I'm speaking from experience. You don't want to see someone you're close to go through cancer, heart attack, a bad accident, and not have the income protection that you could have sold them because you were too afraid to bring it up. Now, I don't think you should go to every Christmas party and start doing a needs analysis on everyone's life insurance. But a no pressure way to do this is, hey, I've got this new product. I need to practice on you. I'm new to the insurance business. Can I practice my presentation on you? Guys, I've shared this. My very first sale was to a guy I went to church with. I practiced on. He was a self-employed farmer. And it was back then, there was no, you didn't have to have insurance. I mean, people went years without insurance. And so I showed him on our plan, and we were selling we called it an association health plan through the National Association for the Self-Employed. And he actually said, I actually kind of like that. Can I buy it? And I'm like, yeah, I'll have to get back to you. I don't know how to do the application, blah, blah, blah. But he ended up buying a plan. And then a year later, he was getting out of his truck. He slipped, landed, broke his back. Had to have back surgery. This was 20 something years ago. It was a $60,000 or $70,000 surgery. And he came to me at church and he said, I am so glad that you asked to practice on me, because if you wouldn't have, I probably wouldn't have had insurance, and that would have cost me 60 grand. So thank you. Guys, we have no idea what hangs in the balance of just asking someone to practice. In the worst case scenario, they said, oh, Sam, that looks great, good. And then they go off and do something else. But some people will look at some of the supplemental income protection products they have, and they'll say, can I get that? You mean I can get this cancer, heart attack, and stroke plan for $30? Can I get that? You got this life insurance plan with living benefits? That's kind of cool. Can I get that? And that will start accelerating your FYCRs, which again, I still believe if you took your friends and family seriously to protect them, I think all you new people could hit 10,000 FYCRs just with your closest friends and family, which will open up Yext so you can get your Google review link and start doing that stuff, because that doesn't start till 10,000. So go practice on your friends and family, show them the products that they didn't even know were out there, get your 10,000 so you can start building up a Google practice. Anything else?
I'd say the biggest takeaway from today is schedule your dialing sessions, turn on your leads, and start making calls. That's how you're going to figure it out, right? You can sit and think about it. You can practice forever and never get into it. Just go do it.
Don't take it personal. It's just part of the business. You just got to do it.
Don't take it personal and get out of your comfort zone.
Yep.
The first one's always the hardest one, right? So,
yeah.
Yep. Well, Cav, I appreciate all of this intel today. We're going to continue with this discussion, and we're going to kind of move deeper and deeper into this sales process. We talk a lot about that. We've got to, diagnose before we prescribe, right? And so I think next week we're moving into fact finding, if I remember correctly, and talking through what that process really looks like. Again, this is not what we're teaching is not rocket science, but there is a systematic approach that you should do in sequential order, and you should practice it and make it your own so that it doesn't sound scripted. But I'd encourage you guys, go back through the last two. The other thing I'd say too is on that summer speaker series, email that I sent out last week. Kevin McIntyre is one of the agents that's in there, and we actually played his video over our lunch hour in training, new agent training last week. And I was just reminded by how powerful his story is, number one. And number two, he talked in that video a lot about how he launched his business by reaching out to 400 people that knew him, liked him, and wanted to see him be successful. And he didn't reach out to them to sell them anything. He just reached out to let them know what he was doing, provided some business cards, some marketing materials, had a nice letter that he put together, that Center of Influence letter. So if you haven't done that yet, do that. I mean, get started on that ASAP. That's something you can begin like today if you haven't done that yet. So we'll reconvene next week. Cap, thanks again. Sandra, appreciate you being here. Everybody else, I appreciate you being here as well. If you have questions, let us know. Otherwise, have a great week. Enjoy the warmer weather. See y'all.